Hi there. I want to do a video on human pedigree analysis. You probably have a copy of this worksheet. If you want a blank one to do it again, come talk to me. I'm sure if you look pedigree analysis online, there might even be some examples. Okay, so I added this part because this wasn't in our notes, but there's 3 choices. Let's talk about them first. Okay, I'm gonna mess up my stuff. There. Makes me happier. Whoops. There we go. No. Make it happy for you and happy for me. All right. So I'm going to show you the decision tree that I use to do this. And it starts out, you start by looking at a child with the trait, whatever it is. And in pedigrees, the traits or the affected ones are the ones that are colored in. Okay. And that's a girl. And that's a boy. And what you do is you look and you go, do the parents, at least one of them, have trait? And this is a beautiful dichotomous key. Nope. Yep. Oops. Dichotomous key just means there's 2 choices all the time. And I try and keep my choices super simple so that it's not hard. You just follow the path and away you go. Right? In other words, if you go up and you look at the parents, are they colored in? And I'm going to say at least one. I should have written it better, but you get the idea. They don't both have to have it, but at least one does. So if the parents don't, it's a recessive trait. You know that, right? Recessive means it can hide for a generation. If the parents do have it, it's probably going to be a dominant trait. And I say probably because, you know what, there's always going to be an exception to the rules I try and make, but this is how I look at it. So if it's a dominant trait, boom, done. You go through every child that's got a trait. If at least one of their parents have it in the entire picture, boom, dominant trait, autosomal dominant. End of story. If it's recessive, you got to make one more decision. And that decision is there equal male, females affected or with the trait? And I'm making a mess. So if the answer is no, sex linked. And I'm just going to apologize right now. I'm really thinking I should have just done this on a separate sheet of paper as opposed to doing it right here. If it's yes, then it's autosomal. Okay, just like this one is. Oops, I lost a U there. Which means it's carried on chromosomes 1 to 22. The sex-linked one just carried on the X and Y chromosome. Don't worry about it. We're going to go through all this stuff. Let's take a look at our first pedigree here. So I find these easiest if I read them from the bottom and I start with the children at the bottom. So if I look at this, right, so this girl, her mama had it. Okay, I'm checking to see if the recessive pattern is there anywhere. This boy, dad had it, and this girl, dad had it. So every child that has that trait, either mom or dad has the trait. So, ta-da, that is a dominant trait. Another way, and it's not as good because that's what I do to check. is if it's present in every generation, if like most of the people are colored in, it's probably a dominant trait. But the way to know for sure is you look at every individual and you make sure at least one of their parents have that trait. Okay. Now, let's look at this generation. All right, so I don't know that my highlighter helps, but if we trace back, we're good. Mom's got it. Dad's got it. If we go from here, mom's got it. Mom's got it. So this also looks like a dominant trait. And remember, that dominant trait doesn't have to be some really rare disease. It could be as simple as brown hair. Okay, so it's being carried down. All right, the next one. Uh-oh, look at that. If we start on the bottom, right there. This one will do. Look, this one, when we trace back, neither of the parents have it. So that's telling me I know it's recessive. Even if, for example, these guys were all colored in and everything else, there was always a parent that had it. All you need is one instance. It's like a counterexample from math. One instance that messes it up. So it's recessive. But then, come back here, I've come down this path. Then we have to see if it's equal male and female affected. Well, if you look at the picture, remember guys are square and girls are roundy. Male, 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 male. So pretty sure this is X-linked recessive. Ta-da! That's how you do it. If this had been like 2 girls here, 2 boys there, then you would be done because you would have, you'd write autosomal, right? Because then it's equal, more or less equal. All right, let's take a look at the next page. Oops, sorry. All right. You know what? If you have this page, turn off the camera and do the analysis. You got this? All right, look, right there. There's enough to say it's recessive. Now, because we have 1 male and 1 female, I would say it's autosomal. If it was both guys, then we could, argue it might be X-linked. What do you think about this one? Well, first of all, I'm going to circle like that. I know it's recessive. I'm going to say autosomal. But that's kind of best guess. It'd be easier if there were more children. But that's pretty much my idea. If it was X-linked, it'd be more likely that one of the boys had it. All right, next one. This means this one was married twice. Okay, but nobody in this row has the trait, and we've got boys down here that have the trait. So I'm going to say this is recessive and X-linked. And on this one, I may regret this, but we're going to go through and determine the genotypes of each individual in this picture if we can. So, all right. So sometimes you're just supposed to find the pattern, but sometimes I also ask you to determine the genotypes of individuals. On a test or something like that, the test that's coming up, I'm not going to ask you to determine the genotypes of everybody in the entire picture, because that's a lot of work for you, and it's a lot of work for me when I go to market. On an exam, I might say, tell me the genotype of individual number 6 or number 13 or number 3 or something like that. So what do we got? We know it's X-linked recessive. So our options, normal, carrier, and Y. Okay, so those are the 3. If those don't look familiar, then you should watch my ever so cool video that I've forgotten the name of it, sex-linked traits. And the first thing I'm going to do is, I think I'm just going to be lazy. I'm going to go through and I'm going to put that every female is going to be XX and every male is going to be XY. Because I know that part. I don't have to think. Okay, so all the females are like that, and all the males. This is going to get messy. That's why I was worried it's going to get messy. I think you guys can still read it. All right, that wasn't hard, but I got most of them done. Now, the ones that are colored in are the ones with a trait. So this is for normal, and this is the trait. So I know, hold on. I'm going to pause this. I'm going to make a better. Okay, I couldn't handle it. It was too squishy for me. So I printed it out bigger. And just to remind you where we were, we said this was an X-linked recessive trait, because here we have an example of these 2 boys have the trait, mom and dad don't, so we know it's recessive. And when you look, this is all guys that have the trait, so it's going to be X-linked. And sorry, I can get rid of this. So our choices, and the Y chromosome. Okay, so the Y chromosome is normal. So I went through, all the guys are XY, all the girls are XX. And I can do that without really having to think too much. The guys that are colored in are the ones that have the trait. So if we were talking about hemophilia, they have hemophilia. If we're talking about color blindness, they have color blindness. So I know that every one of these guys that's colored in is X little n y. And I find it, I don't know how to say it, doing it as a batch is just so much easier, because all of these guys have the same genotype. Now let's look at the rest of the guys. All of the ones that aren't colored in, so there's 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are normal. How do we know? Well, not colored in, they're not showing their trait. So they have capital N's. And capital N, capital N. So without too much figuring out, we have done the genotype of all the guys in the picture. Now we have to worry, now we have to do some research and some thinking. All of the females, so mom and the daughters here, are all normal. They don't have the trait, but we don't know if it's they don't have the trait at all, or they don't have the trait and they're carriers. But we do know they're normal. So every single one of them is going to get one capital N because they are normal. They are not showing the trait. So then it's just that second gene that we have to figure out. So let's look at this one, this girl. So if we trace back, I'll use my handy dandy highlighter, her lineage, mom and dad. Oh, I think I may have just run into trouble. We know for sure that she's normal, and that could be the gene she got from dad. But we still don't know if she's a carrier. Let me skip up. Let's do mom. This one's easier. So mom up here, if we go back, this boy right here has a lowercase n. He didn't get that from dad. He got the Y chromosome from dad. So this must have come from mom. So anytime you have these afflicted boys with that have the trait, that came from mom because dad gave them the Y chromosome. So that means now when I look at his sisters, I can say that this chromosome came from dad, but I don't know what chromosome came from mom. It could be X capital N, X capital N, or X capital N, whoopsies, capital N, X little n. So that's why you write X and a blank. The only way, well, I guess there's two ways. I suspect there's some kind of a genetic test that you could do for this trait, or you would wait until she had children. When she has children, then you could see if she passed on the trait. If she did, then you know she's a carrier for sure. If she didn't, she might be a carrier, she might not, or she might just be X capital N. You don't know. You don't know for sure. So based on that reasoning, I didn't realize this was going to be an option on this one. All of these daughters, until we see the next generation, we don't know. And that's part of the thing about pedigrees, is you don't always know what the full genotype is. Sometimes you can only do partials. Okay, there's that one. All right, I'm gonna go back to the worksheet because it's pretty straightforward. Oh, here we go. There's a lot of recessive ones here. All right, so there we go. That's a recessive trait. I would probably just worry about you saying recessive because we don't know for sure if it is X-linked or not. But if I had to guess, I would say yes, because it's a boy that's affected. Okay, let's look at this one. All right, this looks a little more exciting. Let's see. So start at the bottom. This girl, her mom has it. Mom has it. Nobody affected there. We go here. Okay. Everybody has an affected parent. So this is autosomal dominant. If you study genetics at university, you can come back and you can coach me and give me some other options, but there's only 3 that we're worried about. Okie dokie. Oh, right there. Ooh. Done. Recessive. Recessive because it skips a generation, but mostly because this boy has it, his parents did not. And if you see a guy and a guy and a guy, and those are the only people that have it, and it is, what have I been writing? Not sex-linked, X-linked recessive. Okay, cool, cool. Excellent. Ha. This is one where we are going to work out the genotypes of everybody in the picture. This is the one I intended to do in class because it's pretty big. Before you do it, you need to figure out what kind of pattern it is before you start throwing letters in it. So I'm gonna, and you're gonna figure it out. Stop the camera, stop the video, figure it out. All right, I'm gonna trust you did. 1, 2, okay, so these children, dad had it. This one, mom had it. Grandpa had it. These guys, these two, dad had it. These two, if we trace back, mom had it. All right, so everybody has at least one parent that has the trait. So that means this is going to be autosomal dominant. Okay, don't judge me. I don't know why I just made my D backwards. Maybe because it's 3:30 in the afternoon. Okay, so autosomal dominant. So this could be a trait as simple as brown hair, brown eyes, freckles, dimples. I'm just going to use T for trait and little t for no trait. Is that okay? That's what I'm going to do. All right. So that tells me that I don't want to do this. Well, that tells me that everybody that's colored in and has a trait has at least a capital T because they are showing the trait. So I'm going to go through. Everybody gets capital T. Everybody that's colored in. I don't know what else they got. Maybe they are homozygous. Maybe they are not. I have no idea at this point, but I know they have the trait. Which means all the ones that aren't colored in don't have the trait. And if we look, I'm going to put it up here. There's only 3 possible genotypes for this. Okay. This guy has a trait, or gal. So does that person. These ones, no trait. Which means everybody in the whole picture that's not colored in is going to be 2 little t's. And I'm going to just do them all. When I first started doing these, I would go through and do like one person at a time and no, this is so much easier. Because no matter how many times I do this, the ones, if it's an autosomal dominant trait, ta-da, there, look, half of my picture's done. Now we got to figure out the ones that are colored in. We need to do a little more work and figure out what's happening. And I find it easier if I start bottom and work up. So let's look at this fine little lady right here, this lady. Okay, if we go up and look at her parents, she clearly got the capital T trait from dad, but what did she get from mom? Exactly. The only thing she could get is a little t, because that's all that mom has. Mom doesn't have the trait. See, mom's got blue eyes. Okay, dad's got brown eyes, but mom's got blue eyes, and that's the only thing she can get. Same with her brother. So now we know the full genotype of this generation. Now let's go up. Let's look at dad. Well, if we look at his parents, his dad didn't have the trait. So the only possible gene this dad could contribute to this one is the little t. That's it. No other choices. Let's keep going along this line. All right. How about you do it? How about these two? Figure out the full genotype. So we're missing a letter. We don't know if it's a capital T or it's a little t. Well, look at the parents. If we go up, dad only can contribute a lowercase t. Dad didn't have the trait. So these guys are all going to be heterozygous, just like they were over here and over here. All right, up to the next generation. So these are the children. If we go up and look at the parents, here we go. Mom doesn't have the trait, so heterozygous, 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 heterozygous. And uh-oh, now we're in trouble because we don't know what his parents are. But we can also look down the generations and figure it out. If we look at this son right here, he has two, he doesn't have the trait. So he's got two recessive genes here. One of those recessive genes came from mom. The other recessive gene must have come from dad. And there we go. I think we have covered off everybody in the entire picture. But the key here, for me at least, is you start with that. And once you know the autosomal dominant, then you're going to use a capital T for whatever the trait is and a lowercase for no trait. If you wanted to use D for dimples and lowercase d for no dimples, like use a specific thing, that's cool. I don't care. But ta-da, there we go. Now, that was an autosomal one. All right, one more. I challenge you to turn off the video now and give it a shot. Let's do an analysis. Let's take a look. Here, boy number 4, if we go up, his parents didn't have it. And the same thing with boy number 8 here. So we know it's a recessive trait. Remember, recessive means child has it, parents do not. Oh, you can also see here it skips an entire generation. If something skips a generation, it's hidden recessive trait. Right? It's almost like the definition of a recessive trait. Now, to figure out whether it's X-linked or not, or autosomal, we've got 1, 2, 3 females, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. I'd probably not put this on a test for you because you could argue either way. But I'm going to say it's just an autosomal one simply because we already did a sex-linked recessive one. So if you've got close to the same number, I would go with autosomal. Even if you had like 1 or 2 females and a bunch of males, it's probably still going to be autosomal. All right, so autosomal recessive. So then I'm going to use N is normal, and little n is the trait. So I need 2 copies of it for the trait to show up. This could be as simple as blonde hair. Now, make our lives easier. Let's look at what our possible genotypes are. We can have 2 capital N's. Sorry, moving around so it doesn't look all wonky. Capital N, little n, 2 little n's. This one is going to have the trait, no trait. So based on that, what can you fill in right now? Who has the traits? Colored, not colored. All right, all these ones that are colored in they have the trait. And there's only one genotype where the trait shows up. So I can be lazy. No, I can be efficient. All these ones all look like that. Now, if you remember, I'm just going to flip back for a sec. When we did this one, it was the ones that weren't showing the trait. They were the non-colored ones that we could do right away. So it really, really depends on getting this part right. So if it's autosomal dominant, no traits are going to be the uncolored ones. Whereas if it is a recessive trait, it's going to be the colored ones that get that. So those are all the people that have the trait. Whoops, sorry. Let's say those are all the blondes. And let's say this is brown. What do you know about everybody else in the picture? What color hair do they have? Well, we just said all these colored ones are blonde, which means all the rest of these must have brown hair. But I don't know if they're purebred or not, but I do know they all are normal. They are not showing the trait, so they all score. Well, I'm going to put it in the boxes, and it'll make it easier to see. They're all normal. But the trick, is it this one or is it this one? Oh, and don't forget, there is also the possibility of I don't know. There is that possibility where you can't tell based on where you have the information you have. All right, let's start from the very bottom. Let's go individual number 2 over here. Well, let's go up and look at the parents. Must have got the normal gene from mom. Oops, sorry, from dad. But mom had the trait, so the only thing she could contribute is the little n gene. All right. Now let's look at this person. We can't trace family back because we don't know. He married in, right? This is married, this is having children. But if we look at this child, it has the traits. It has 2 little n's, and one of those must have come from dad. So dad is heterozygous, or essentially a carrier. So he's a carrier for the blonde gene. That sounds wonky, but you know what? My husband's blonde. I have dark hair. My son has dark hair. So he's a carrier. He has the blonde gene. It just doesn't show up. All right, and if we go up, oh, this is kind of cool. Check this out. Mom's blonde. Dad's blonde. All the babies are blonde. You know that, right? You never really thought about it, but those are the only choices. So if my husband had married a blonde-haired woman, then all of their children would be blonde. That's it. Not really any other choices there. Okay. Now, let's go back. Let's keep, where do you want to go? Let's stick on this one. All right, so looking at this boy right here, he's blonde. So what do you know about mom and dad? They must have carried the little n trait. They must be carrying that blonde gene. Now these 3, that just looks bad. These 3 siblings. These ones, you don't know for sure what that second gene is. Whoops. Sorry, I made a mistake. I was thinking X-linked over here. I don't know, because she definitely got a capital N gene from either mom or dad, but there's nothing telling me what that second gene is. It might be a lowercase n, it might be a capital. We would need to either do some kind of genetic testing or wait for these guys and ladies to have children. Once they have children, then we could see whether or not they were carriers. Excuse me. Okay. I don't know. Let's go over here. Dad has got 2 little ends, so the only thing he can pass down to the next generation is a little n. So these guys, ladies and gentlemen, are all carriers. Now it's getting scary. I'm not sure. So I'm getting a little confused. So I'm going to start at the top. It's okay to go to different spots because I know here, mama is blonde. Okay. So that little n is going to end up with this parent, sorry, this child and this child. We already knew that child. Well, we knew it this way, but now we can confirm it this way. So can we figure out, oh, okay, from here, if we trace back, because that's the only way we could get this child with two little ends is if mom and dad both were like that. Who else are we missing? Oh, we're missing this boy. I'm going to erase that. I'm going to nominate him as we don't know yet because neither of these parents is purebred, so we don't know. We know there's a capital N, but we don't know, let's say if that capital N is from dad, we don't know if mom contributed the capital N or the little n. And we can say the same thing about this lady here. I'm going to give her an I don't know. If there was a girl, if they decided to have more babies and they had a girl and the girl had the trait, then we would know what mom is. But based on these children, we don't know yet. And so we can't do that. And it's okay not to know. All right, not know, not know. And the only other one is grandpa, great-grandpa, great-great. Anyway, the guy up here, I'm going to say I don't know either. If one of his children had been colored in, had the trait, then we would know for sure. Because they're all going to get the lowercase 1 from mom. And they're getting a capital N, the trait, the normal, from dad. But we don't know whether that one is another little n or it is 2 capital N's. I'll tell you a secret. This one, don't use it because you never know for sure. I can't think of any situation where you're going to know for sure that's the trait because it could be, for example, like this one. We don't know until we had a child that is blonde. All right, I think this has turned into a really long video, so I'm going to stop, but I'm thinking now you're going to be amazing when it comes to pedigree analysis.